Hello, and welcome to Mornings with Jewelle, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. So we'd like to welcome all. This is the Mornings with Jewelle CRE podcast, and we're very excited to have with us today Jill Kennedy as our special guest from Ensemble. Ensemble, it looks like it's been doing a lot of tremendous work around the country. You have a pretty large portfolio from what I see. So you guys are out there developing and snatching up properties left and right. So congratulations on that. Congratulations on being part of the team. But Jill, just give us a little introduction as to who you are, what you do, and then we'll take a little bit of a deeper dive into your background for those who don't know you.
Great. Thanks for having me, Joel. I'm really excited to be part of the podcast. This is going to be my first official podcast, so bear with me if I don't know all the etiquette or whatnot.
No
so
far, so good, by the
way. Great. I am the Director of Development at Ensemble Real Estate Investments based in Long Beach, California, and also have offices in Phoenix, Nevada as well. And we recently opened up an office in Philadelphia, which is where I recently relocated to from the California office. My primary role is particularly on the development side of our mixed use and multifamily projects that we have in our pipeline. It's pretty much what I'm going to be doing out in Philadelphia, but I've also had a lot of projects up in the Bay Area and in Southern California as well.
Okay, all right, fantastic. So how in the world do you get to be one of the primary developers on such a large company doing so many things at such a young age?
I know, I do look young, don't I? But I will say I'm still one of the young aspiring developers out there. And I will say I got started, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia, and I went to Georgia State University and got my undergrad in real estate. During that time, the recession had just happened, and I knew I wanted to be a developer just from family, and it was definitely a tough market at that time in 2008, 2009. And so I decided to pivot and go into the public sector and ended up being a city planner. But I felt like I was getting so far away from development, I decided to go back to school and went to Columbia University in New York. And from there, I got a mentor through the program who was working for a very large development firm out in the New York, New Jersey office and put me in touch with their Southern California office. And so I decided to interview and learn from them and got the job out there. And then Ensemble found me and I liked what they were offering. And one of the main things I told them was I wanted to grow my career, and they heard me. And so it's been great working with them. Been with Ensemble for about 4 years now. And so they definitely have helped me build up my resume. So.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Now, just to take a quick little detour, because we have something in common. I rarely find anyone that has traveled more than me or been to more places than I've been, and I think you might have me beat. So let me ask you a couple of questions related to that. You love to travel, from what I understand. Is that safe to say? All right.
Yes, I do.
Fantastic. And what would you say is probably your favorite place that you've been so far? And that might be a little difficult, but what would you say to that?
It is. It is. I get that question all the time. I've been to probably over 40 countries. And I think one of the first places I've been to was Egypt and Dubai. That was one of the first places, and that was in 2008. And this is around the time where Dubai in particular was buzzing, and they were talking about they were going to build the world's tallest building and do all this stuff. And I was like, okay, I got to see what this is all about. Mm-hmm. So I went out there and I was like, wow, they are really building up a city out of nothing. So since then, I visited a couple of times, and I would say that it is definitely inspiration to see, a city come together and build something. And I guess because I've been there so many times, I think I can safely say that's one of my favorite places to visit.
Gotcha. All right, well, that's cool. Actually, believe it or not, I was supposed to head there in 2020, and obviously COVID had some other plans, so I didn't make that trip. But that's
Yeah.
definitely place to be.
Actually, funny story about that. When I came back from Dubai, I went to, I think it was a crew conference or something. There was a speaker on the panel, and it just happened to be Bruce Kellogg. He was talking about recently coming back from Dubai, and that's how we started the conversation. That's how I met him. Was, hey, I just came from Dubai. He's like, oh, I was just there too, doing a speaking engagement, and so since then we've been ever since.
Wow. How about that? Small world. That's amazing how that came together. What would you say was your most unique place?
I would say Tel Aviv.
Okay.
I went there a few years ago. One of my classmates is from there, and so I told him, "Hey, I want to come visit you." And so I came out there and just to see Tel Aviv versus Jerusalem. It was definitely a different experience. I liked it, and it basically I thought it was something that most people probably would not want to go to, or especially as Americans, you see what's on the news, and it was definitely not what you hear on the news. So take it with a grain of salt.
Gotcha. No, that makes a good sense. It makes a lot of sense, rather. And then one final question on that subject. What would you say is your most desirable place that you want to get to that you haven't been to yet?
So, okay, I got to look at my world map here and see. So I actually haven't been to a lot of countries in Africa, and so I want to kind of touch that continent more. I've only been to, I think, South Africa and Ghana and Egypt for that matter. So if I can get to more of those, I think that would be my next move.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Sounds good. We're very exciting. So then you gotta wonder as we tie this all together, you've been able to travel all these places, do all these great things, but yet and still you're involved in some really interesting projects. From what I understand, you've just been relocated to Philadelphia, just moved to Philadelphia from Los Angeles, and I know some of this is undercover and you can't talk about all of it, but you're part of the Brooklyn. I keep saying Brooklyn, part of the Philadelphia Navy Yard and that redevelopment. Is that the case? And what's that all about?
Yes, Ensemble had submitted an RFP. I believe it was, now we're in 2020, so I feel like it was 2 years ago, right before the pandemic, or right in the middle. Wow, we have been in pandemic for 2 years now. Hard to believe. So July of 2020, I believe we submitted and won the RFP, and then we decided to create a joint venture with Mosaic, who is our development partner. So for the Philadelphia specifically, Navy Yard, it's an Ensemble Mosaic partnership and not just Ensemble. So all the projects that I'm working on have Mosaic as our partner as well.
And
That
Mosaic's
process,
Mosaic's a minority firm, just to be clear,
correct.
in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm not mistaken, they're probably the largest African American owned development company in the city, and they have built a lot of affordable housing projects in the city. I like working with them. They've been great. And so just pulling in their expertise, especially on the affordable housing front, has been very valuable. In terms of the Navy Yard itself, we as Ensemble had initially been involved with the Navy Yard. We had built the Courtyard Marriott there a few years ago. And then we ended up buying some of the existing office portfolio from Liberty Property Trust, which no longer is around. I believe Prologis had bought out their assets, and then they didn't want to pursue the office side. And Ensemble, we are well-rounded. We do office, hospitality, multifamily, and so we already had the hotel in line. And so having the offices in our portfolio was a good move for us. And then when the RFP came out, we thought, oh, we're already here in the Navy Yard. This would be a great opportunity. And so part of the RFP process was to redevelop approximately 110 acres as part of the master plan. So right now, I'm currently working on the first phase, and the first phase includes a hotel, multifamily, life science, and we also are building a parking garage to accommodate all of the new uses that are going to be there. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
This is like a developer's dream to like build a master plan community. So, and coming down to the Navy Yard, if you ever been, it's pretty secluded, but once you go in, you're like, wow, all this is here. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, yeah. So what's the overall scope of the Navy Yard project? How large is it going to be? How many square feet of space? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's probably going to take a 10, 15-year build out to fully redevelop the Navy Yard. The Navy, it's 1,200 acres, and we control 110 of that. So you can imagine it's pretty large.
Yeah.
Something I wanted to bring up is while I was working at the city of Atlanta, one of my big projects there was Fort McPherson.
Okay.
And if anybody's familiar with the Base Realignment and Enclosure Act, but that's the BRAC process where military bases close and give it back to the city, and the city has to be responsible for coming up for a redevelopment plan. And at the time that Fort McPherson was closing, I was in charge of rezoning the 400, I think it was 400 acres into mixed use, green space, life sciences, bioscience. So all of that was like 10 years ago. And so now I feel like it's come full circle to actually implement a similar plan to that at the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So this is like a dream come true for it to come full circle for me to build this. And so, as you know, development projects like this take a while, and we're only on the first phase. Who knows? There might be 5 phases by the time we get through the first phase. But right now, we're just focused on the first phase, which is, if I recall, I think it's over 1 million square feet. But don't quote me on that.
Okay. All right. Wow. So the first phase is pretty large as well from that standpoint. Right, right. So what is actually what would you say your specialty is? I saw some information related to your dealings with the states and cities and things of that sort. Are you covering the full scope of development, or are you more specifically to a niche aspect of it?
Yes, so I actually focus mostly on the pre-development phase.
Okay.
As I mentioned, my background was a city planner, and so having that is, I would say, pretty rare for a developer. Most developers usually might have an engineering background or a finance background, but I came as a city planner, and having that relationship with cities and whatever jurisdiction that you're working with has been critical. If you've ever built in California, particularly Southern California, then you probably know how difficult it is to get a project entitled with all of the red tape that comes with it. The entitlement phase is pretty much my niche. I know how to navigate through the city process for the most part. And it wasn't until I realized while I was in school, I took a real estate law class, and they mentioned, I think it was like maybe like a paragraph about zoning. And I was like, zoning's pretty important. That could make or break a project.
Yeah.
Why are you talking about this? So that's how I got my foot in the door with city planning, was with the planning department and understanding zoning. And as I mentioned, rezoning Fort McPherson. So understanding where cities are going with their redevelopment plans. Are they rezoning their industrial land to mixed use, multifamily? Are they retaining it? So having that understanding and understanding what the city community plans are is I believe, important for developers to know. Because again, that's probably one of the riskiest sides of things is when you're doing a land deal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, big time, because if you don't get that zoning, everything else falls apart. So it's very, very important. So thank you for bringing that up, and that's actually a very good point. Your background as a city planner certainly has kind of showed you behind the curtain on how to navigate these things, where a lot of people wouldn't have that experience. So that certainly is very important. The Brooklyn's, please, I got to get that out of my head. Philadelphia Navy Yard.
Oh, no worries. My developing the Brooklyn Navy Yard, so it's all the same thing.
Yeah,
in my
yeah.
mind.
Well, I went to school in Brooklyn, so I just, that keeps ringing in my head, because the Navy Yard was always something that was always out there. But no, what I was about to ask you is, what about brownfield issues? I would assume that the Philadelphia Navy Yard had a lot of brownfield issues. Was that the case? And how did you navigate through those if it was the case?
Still navigating. We are working with the Department of Environmental Protection, and obviously we don't know what the Navy was doing years and years ago. And so right now, I believe what we have in place is the Navy has pretty much a D restriction at the moment that needs to be lifted in order to build residential particularly, but everything else is pretty much, I would say, clean or not at high levels of risk. And so just reassuring the state that this is, redeveloped land that can be built for future projects, that's an ongoing process, I would say. But right now, we recently broke ground on our spec lab space without any problems with the DEP, which is the Department of Environmental Protection. But we'll see how things come along as we navigate through that process. And this is fairly new for me in their terms of their process. I've worked on brownfields at the city of Atlanta. That was one of my city planning projects that I managed, the brownfield program. And I was working particularly with the EPA region. And so it's a little bit different here because I'm not working with EPA and it's more of the state process. So, and I didn't have to do any of that in California, but just overall having environmental resources and doing your phase ones and your phase twos has been pretty much an ongoing process, and putting together a work plan for the state and telling them what we're going to test, what are we going to sample, and then going out and doing that in a timely manner. So that's right now what I'm focusing on with the DEP.
Gotcha. So for our listeners, this actually might be a very interesting subject because we really don't dive specifically into brownfield issues. But how do you mitigate a brownfield site? How do you get the tax credits associated with that? How does that process work for the benefit of our listeners? How do you do that?
Well, I would say it was most likely a lengthy process, and it's best you do that during the due diligence phase. Having a really good environmental consultant on board early on is probably critical. Doing a phase one, a thorough phase one, and as most of you guys might know, usually a lender won't lend you anything if it's a dirty site. So making sure that that's cleared and clean. I believe one of our projects in California, we ended up doing, it's an industrial site, had pesticides and a lot of contamination on it. We ended up going through a voluntary cleanup program. I'm not sure if any other states or jurisdictions do that, but that pretty much reassured us that whatever contaminants were on the site was able to get cleaned up, and it wasn't the full site, just certain pockets of it. So I would say doing the due diligence of it is probably the critical path, and it's an ongoing process, even leading up to construction. So that's what I'm dealing with now, is additional samples and more samples. In terms of tax credits, I have not necessarily been involved in that because we're not pursuing any tax credits at the moment for that. So I can't speak on that.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Because what I've found is that a lot more sites are actually brownfield sites. There's a lot of development going on, and what happens is either you're redoing industrial sites because industrial is extremely hot right now, or it could be a situation where now it's being repurposed. Sometimes it's multifamily housing from all sites that were used like that, or other uses, and you've got to clean those sites up. And obviously, in a lot of cases, you can't get those tax credits, those brownfield credits, and things of that sort. So interesting process there, but it's always a lot of work and it always takes a lot of time. So,
yes, it does.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Philadelphia Waterfront, once it's all said and done, what are some of the amenities that are going to be there that would really draw people to that location that you're developing there?
Oh, that's a good question. So since I just recently moved here, I'm getting to know the city more. I moved to Center City, which is downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, most cities that have a downtown usually might have your office, your retail restaurant space. And so how do you keep people at the Navy Yard to stay at the Navy Yard? That's some of the things that we're thinking about. We have the hospitality front. We have the courtyard and building a new hotel as part of our phase one. the residential project that I'm particularly working on, that would have about 25,000 square feet of retail restaurant spaces and residential amenities for those who want to live in the Navy Yard. And there's about 15,000 employees currently at the Navy Yard, if I'm not mistaken. And so having a place to eat for lunch, which is non-existent right now. I work in the Navy Yard, and it's very limited on what I could find to eat there. So bringing in a lot of food vendors or something along those lines would be a great amenity that we're thinking about. And also your neighborhood serving amenities, whether that's a pharmacy or grocery store. So anything to kind of like make it its own neighborhood. So that's kind of the envision of having it more like a live, work, play district as part of Philadelphia.
Gotcha. Are there any plans for green space?
Right now, so there is lots of green space there already, believe it or not. There's the Central Green, which was constructed a few years ago. And every day I see people walking their dogs, their kids, and they have all of these different, they have hammocks and a track. So I think the green space is pretty covered right now for most of it, but that's not to say the future phases might not have additional. And there's a trail, so I see lots of runners there, and green space in itself is probably one of the first things that they wanted to tackle when they came back, when the Navy closed down, essentially.
Okay, all right. Any plans for the waterfront, like a boardwalk or anything like that? There's planning for that area.
That is
like
definitely
along the waterfront. Because I haven't seen the design for it, so I'm really asking out of curiosity. I don't know, and then I've got things I'm working on in Philly, so I'm kind of curious about the whole area. Yeah.
Yes, so that's definitely a future phase as part of the master plan. So there might be a couple of high rises there, whether it be hotels, residential offices along the waterfront. So who knows? At this time, it's more like maybe that's probably like 10 years out by the time we get to the waterfront. Because right now we're kind of building closer to the gate with Broad Street and then working our way towards the waterfront.
Oh, okay. All right. I understand. Well, let me do this. I'm actually going to start opening up the line for any of you guys that want to ask questions of Jewelle, and see if we go a little bit deeper into this subject here. So feel free to unmute yourself or use your digital hand, or even use the chat, and we'll be happy to entertain those questions. So Jewelle, this is obviously an exciting project. You're working with Ensemble. What are your plans for the future? Obviously, you've got a tremendous background and a lot of raw materials that you can use to do some huge things. I mean, and having this on your resume is going to be huge as well. Do you have any future plans for other things you plan on working on that you're willing to share or able to share?
Future plans. Well, I want to continue this project. This will probably be my first project that I could do start from finish. I've worked on a dozen or so development projects throughout my career, and it's always been in different phases where I'm just on the acquisition side of it or due diligence, or I've done project that's in the middle of construction, or a project that's finishing up construction and we're ready to open. And so this would probably, my residential project particularly here would be my first project that I've gotten entitled, and then we'll be able to start construction and open. So I want to at least stay on that project to see it, the full cycle of it. So that's my future plan right now. And in terms of personal, I want to give back more to particularly minorities who are looking into getting into development. I'm still, as you probably know, the only one that looks like me in the room. And I definitely think there's a lot of talented future developers out there that look like me as well. And just having become a resource, because I didn't really have that when I got into the field. So starting to connect with more younger people that are interested in getting to real estate. I used to get the comment all the time when I told people I was in real estate. They're like, "Oh, you're an agent?" No, I'm a real estate developer. And then it gets, well, what is that?
Yeah.
So, and as you can only imagine, I'm definitely want to kind of pay it forward. And right now I'm mentoring a couple of young young people that are about to graduate from school and are interested in getting into the field as well.
Okay, all right, sounds good, sounds good. Uriah Robinson had asked a question about reaching out to you if you have some questions later on. What would be the best way to do that? You know, for email, LinkedIn, phone? I mean, what works for you?
Oh, yes. So you guys can find me on LinkedIn, Jewelle F. Kennedy. You can definitely send me an email. My email, I can probably put it in the chat, but it's jkennedy@ensemble.net. So that's probably the two best ways to get in touch with me.
Okay, all right. Sounds good, sounds good. So about the youth, I wanted to talk about that a little bit as well, because you worked with Habitat for Humanity. That's something that I've been involved in as well over the years. As you know, this whole podcast came about with trying to help that next wave of people coming along that might want to get into commercial real estate. So it's something I'm very passionate about as well. I don't know, maybe we should have a conversation offline about how we can both maybe work together to help, out in that regard, because it sounds like we have the same focus as regards doing that. So that's a very good thing there. Well, let's see, Uriah brought up another point here. What are the top three things to consider when doing your due diligence and phase analysis? So how would you answer that?
So top three, we kind of touched on it earlier about the environmental aspect. That's probably the most unforeseen part of the due diligence, because as the seller, they're responsible for giving you everything that they know. And then once you buy the site as is, then, you're on your own. So you can trust the seller's materials, but you're probably best to go and do an additional phase one and phase two just to be safe. And understanding the numbers, the finance. I am lucky enough to have someone do all the numbers for me at Ensemble, but seeing if the deal works and knowing what you want your return metrics to be is probably important. And then the third is knowing in terms of the zoning side of it and what if the project is allowed to build what you want to build, and if you have to do any other additional entitlements. It is probably easier to buy an entitlement site, but it's also more expensive to buy an entitlement site. But if you want to buy, an industrial piece of land and do the entitlements yourself, just know that it's a lot of heavy lifting when you have to do that route. And that's mostly what I focus on. Most of my projects have been me entitling the site and then selling it. But as Ensemble Mosaic, we are long-term holders, so it's very rare that we do sell our project sites. There's something I learned in school a long time ago that stuck with me. It said, never fall in love with your real estate, because you never know. You might have an opportunity to sell it for a profit, and then there might be a better deal out there. So I've kind of take that to heart. So,
yeah, very good point. You can also hold on to a piece of property past its window and fall into a recessionary cycle and can't get out where you want to get out.
Yes.
So, so you got a real problem there as well. So very good point. JFK wanted to ask this about what made you get into development knowing it's a male-dominated field. I don't think anything's going to scare you off, but go for it. How would you answer that?
well, JFK is actually my dad, so disclaimer. But I'm like, that looks familiar. So in terms of that, I didn't really realize it was a male-dominated field until I started working in the field, because when I was in school, there was a lot of females in my classes, a lot of development classes that I took. I feel like half of them were in development in school. It wasn't until I started working for my first development firm that I realized, I'm like, wow, there is not a lot of females in this industry. And then I've joined a lot of professional organizations like ULI and NAIOP and CREW, and still cannot find any women in development. So I thought, I didn't really think much of it until probably recently, which is part of the reason why I want to give back and get more minority, particularly women, involved in development, because I just started realizing that, okay, maybe this really is a male-dominated field. What I feel like I didn't do anything major to stand out. I I went to school and I was very adamant about getting into development. I networked my way through. And so I definitely think there's opportunity to get it. And it's more so in the back of my mind. Yes, I know that I am the only female in the room for some time, but I don't let that hinder me, if that makes sense.
Okay, all right. Then what about pressure due to your race and gender? Well, you mentioned the female part, so yeah. Any additional pressure you feel related to that?
Yeah, I kind of do, especially working on a big project like this. Kind of being the face of a project is pretty important. You definitely see a lot of the owners and developers that are, mostly white male dominated in like the major projects that you see around the cities, around the country for that matter. But there's definitely a lot of developers out there that get opportunities through public-private partnerships. So I know I'm not alone, but I definitely see those. Like obviously we have, H.J. Russell down in Atlanta and a few others, minority-owned, Black-owned businesses, developers out there that are pretty much, paving the way for people like me and future developers to come out.
Okay, all right. Sounds good. Sounds good. So let me ask this: how do you think we might be able to help you, or you help us, as regards getting the message out and encouraging others to take this up as a career path? Because, like I don't often, say everything that I do, but it was kind of interesting. Just this weekend, this guy came up to me. He said, "Yeah, I heard you're in real estate." So then he said, "Well, I want to buy a house. How much money can I get? You're a realtor, right?" And I'm like, "Okay." So he's like all over the place, right? Doesn't know nothing about nothing, but you get that. So I can certainly relate to that, right? Everybody thinks you're a realtor. Not that there's anything wrong with realtors. Let me be clear about that. I'm not demeaning them, but it's just that there's many more avenues to real estate other than being a realtor. But how do you think we could work together to help this objective, which we both have? Whether your thoughts on that, or maybe we need to give it more thought. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we need to start it at the high school level. When I graduated as a senior, I remember looking at different colleges and universities that offered a real estate program because my parents kind of instilled in me, like, you should look into development and look into like real estate investing. And I thought, okay, well, what schools have that? And just so happened, Georgia State, it had a really good program that covered all aspects of real estate, from, appraisal to development to law to everything, investment. So I got a taste of everything through that. And I wish I could have got that during high school. So kind of going out to like high schools and getting them, introduced to the different aspects of real estate and not just being a realtor would probably be a good start.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point. I remember in my high school yearbook is a picture of me standing inside of a skyscraper in Manhattan, and I said, "Yeah, I'm gonna be building stuff like this when I get older." But I was in
Yeah.
high school, right? So that's a very good point. If you start young, and because a lot of young ones don't know what they want to do, but to show them what the possibilities are is important. And I often talk about how there was a lot of youth when I was growing up that they thought that their way out of bad situations was either drugs or sports. And that was it. It was never real estate development, right? Or anything related to that. It was drugs or sports. And to be able to understand that you don't have to do that. You don't have to risk your life or put all your chips on one thing and hope that you become that one of a million to become that star athlete. Because even a lot of people make the professional sports realm, and they just don't make the money they think they're going to make. Or like in football, they might have a 3-year career and then that's it, because of injuries and things
Yep.
of that sort. So to have something that is more of a lifelong skill, which is really what you have, the ability to go in and do all the pre-development work and everything else is a very, very valuable skill to have. And so I see why Ensemble snatched you up when you were available out there. So that's a skill that's needed. That's really, really powerful. So that's really good. I know you were also at Avalon. How were things over there? Because I know some of their principles as well. You were doing multifamily development there, or what? That was some of your earlier work.
Yes, definitely. Avalon Bay paved the way for Ensemble. and where I'm at today. The mentor I mentioned earlier was working for Avalon Bay in the New Jersey office, and thought I would be a good asset to the team out in Southern California. And at the time, there were about 10 projects in different phases. And so if you've ever been to Southern California, you know that traffic is crazy and everything's spread out. I underestimated how many projects was under my belt all over the place. I was probably in my car for for like 80% of the time, just driving from one project to the other, getting phone calls from the superintendent at 6 o'clock in the morning, talking about the inspectors coming today. We need to get this building open. And I'm like rushing to get to the project. I'm like, there's absolutely no way this project's ready to open. What are you talking about? So I started to learn, the construction side that way. And it's like, okay, you guys are full of it. This is not ready to be open. Call off the inspection. So I got to learn a lot of that. And Avalon, they've been around since the 70s. And so they know what they're doing. And for them, pretty much learning from them kind of sets the pay for where I'm at now. And I thought about, as far as career moves and advice, a lot of people will ask me, is it good to go with a large firm or like a startup or a small firm? And for me, I thought going with a larger company would be critical for my path as being a double minority woman and Black. I thought going with a company like Avalon Bay would open more doors for me. So I decided to go that route. Not saying that going with a smaller firm probably wouldn't have done that. But for me personally, I thought going with a larger, well-known name, a firm, would pave the way for me to go to like a smaller firm, like an Ensemble Mosaic.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So good stuff. I'm glad you had your time there, and it looks like your path is just going, the direction that it needs to be going. But so Jewel, I didn't really get an answer to that, and I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing this out. It might be something we have to talk about later on. But working together in order to help some of these younger ones. You've got some roots down here in Atlanta, which is good. Well, you said you're from Atlanta, right? Isn't that what you said?
Yeah.
So you definitely got roots down here. So and that's where we're based. So there might be some possibilities there. We just got to think about it. Unless you have something off the top of your head that you think might work. Anything come to mind offhand, or you want to circle back to that topic?
No, definitely. Now that I'm back on the East Coast, I feel like it would be easier for me to travel back down to Atlanta and see my family and friends and like still keep that connection. And I will admit, I hadn't been to Atlanta since I left. That was like 2013. Yes.
Oh, wow.
So I hadn't been back to Atlanta. I have recently, but to actually like see the city, because when I was working for the city, I was approving a lot of plans as a planner and nothing was getting built. So I hear there's like this new Atlanta and see a new Midtown and new downtown. I'm like, wow, all those projects that I approved finally got built. So it's good to see positive change happening in the city. And I was very active in the real estate circles there. As you know, we probably know all of the same people there. So your network is your net worth. So I always learned that early on, and building a relationship. Real estate is all about building relationships, and that's pretty much what I want to focus on. So happy to like get together and see what we can do to work together.
Yeah. We'll think about that. It didn't even really come to my mind until we started having this conversation. But I'm a firm believer that we can always do more together than apart. So if we're trying to accomplish the same goal, there's got to be some synergies that we can pull together to make that happen. So that'll be great. And yeah, you definitely got to see Atlanta now. It's there's not a square piece of dirt anywhere, especially in Midtown, that hasn't been developed. So they're going crazy down here.
That's so crazy to me. I can't believe it. Oh my gosh! And I know the Beltline has been like almost completed, or if it has been completed, it's crazy. So it warms my heart to see, Atlanta progressing, because when I was there, it was just very hard. It was very challenging to find like developers to build anything there. And I see there's like new players out there that I would not think a second would even come to Atlanta. So happy to see some major players come in and make the city a better place.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You would be surprised, but Atlanta's on a lot of people's radars now. We've been trying to buy some additional properties, even ourselves, and the cap rates are so low. You just sit there scratching your head like, this can't be right. Is this like Rockefeller Center prices? I mean, it's like, come on. So, but yeah, and even in the suburban markets, we're seeing a lot of really low cap rates, especially on multifamily. So, yeah, so that's kind of how it is. But yeah, you gotta get down here. I'm sure your family would love to see you as well, and see all of your work and the byproduct of that. Matter of fact, just this week I was talking with another buddy of ours, Keith Mack, who was heading up development for it used to be called the Gulch. It's now called Centennial Yards.
Oh, I know all about that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
He's really good friend of mine. The last time I was in Atlanta, I was hanging out with Keith. So he was one of my first mentors while I was at Georgia State, and he took me under his wing. So he likes to say I'm his protege.
Well, good stuff. Yeah. Well, like you said, we run in the same circle. So, but that's going to be an incredible project, and I'm glad to see it finally coming to fruition. So
yeah.
Really, really exciting. So good stuff. So, all right, well, sounds good. So, anything else you want us to mention, or you want to bring out before we wrap up for today?
I don't think so, but I'm really excited that I was able to be part of this. Thank you for having me. Thanks for everyone for joining and tuning in. So yeah, again, if you want to get in touch with me, you can find me on LinkedIn at Jewelle F. Kennedy, or you can email me at jkennedy@ensemble.net. Happy to share my knowledge, and if you have any questions, let me know.
All right, fantastic. Well, we certainly appreciate it. It's been a great time having you today. I appreciate you being part of the podcast. So this has been the Mornings with Joel CRE podcast. We want to thank our special guest, Jewelle Kennedy, for being with us today. And we look forward to seeing you on an upcoming podcast. Thank you so much. Jewelle, thank you again.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Mornings with Joel, commercial real estate podcast, where we focus on rising stars and established players in commercial real estate and talk to them about how they are building legacies in today's marketplace. Please check back weekly to hear our upcoming guests.